The scream sliced through the air, high and panicked, carrying across the glittering surface of the community pool. For one split second, I thought some kid had belly flopped or spotted a bee. Then I saw the scene. My daughter, Sophie, hair dripping, little arms flailing as a woman twice her size yanked her bodily out of the shallow end by her ponytail. I dropped my paperback so fast it splashed into the chlorinated water at my feet. "Hey!" I shouted, half running, half slipping across the deck. My flip-flops slapped against the concrete. The woman, Karen, of course it was Karen, was all sharp angles and blinding pastel. Her visor matched her acrylic nails. She had the permanent squint of someone who'd been staring too long at everyone else's business. And right then, her hand was tangled in my daughter's wet hair like she was pulling weeds. "Let go of her!" My voice cracked, not out of fear but pure fury. I shoved my sunglasses to the top of my head so I could lock eyes with her, mother to menace. Karen didn't flinch. She jutted her chin at Sophie, who was now crying, cheeks blotchy, scalp red. "This child is not authorized to be in the pool," she snapped, like she was announcing a shoplifter over a loudspeaker. "No wristband, no swim. Rules are rules." "Are you insane?" I lunged forward, prying Karen's claw off my kid's hair. "She's 7. She's not sneaking into a Vegas nightclub. This is the community pool we pay for every month." "Excuse me," Karen said, drawing herself up like she was about to deliver the Gettysburg Address. "But the HOA guidelines clearly state that." "Oh, don't you dare." My blood was boiling. "You don't get to assault my daughter and then hide behind your rulebook." Around us, parents sat frozen on their lounge chairs, caught between pretending to scroll their phones and sneaking glances like it was the best live entertainment they'd seen all summer. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They knew better than to cross Karen, president of the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association. People whispered about her power like she had some kind of ancient HOA sorcery. One complaint to her, and suddenly your mailbox would accidentally get ripped out of the ground, or your fence paint wouldn't pass inspection. Sophie clung to me, hiccuping. "Mommy, I was just playing." "I know, baby." I rubbed her back. My hands were shaking from the rush of adrenaline, from the sheer audacity of this bleach-blonde dictator who thought she could lay a hand on my child. Karen planted her hands on her hips. "You'll receive a violation notice for this. Children must wear their wristbands at all times within HOA-managed amenities. No exceptions. I could have security remove you." I barked a laugh, sharp and humorless. "Security? What? The lifeguard with acne? You're unbelievable." Karen's nostrils flared. "You're going to regret this. The board does not take kindly to." She stopped mid-threat. Her gaze flicked over my shoulder, and her mouth snapped shut like a trap. That was when I realized my husband had arrived. Tom isn't the loud type. He doesn't need to be. He has that kind of presence where you just know he's there, like a sudden shift in pressure before a storm. His t-shirt clung damply to his chest, and his jaw was set like stone. He walked over, calm but heavy, and crouched to Sophie's level. "You okay, sweetheart?" His voice was low, steady. She nodded into his chest, still hiccuping. He kissed the top of her wet hair before straightening up. And when his eyes locked on Karen, I swear the temperature dropped 5 degrees. Karen faltered. Her lips parted, then closed, like she wasn't used to being looked at like she was the one breaking the rules. She smoothed her visor, cleared her throat. "I was simply enforcing HOA policy. You put your hands on my daughter." Tom's voice was quiet, but it carried. No yelling. No theatrics. Just flat truth that made my skin prickle. "That's not policy. That's assault." Karen opened and closed her mouth like a fish. She was waiting for someone else to jump in, to save her. But the parents who'd been watching from their lounges suddenly found the tops of their feet fascinating. No allies came. Not one. Tom didn't push it. He didn't need to. He just held Karen's gaze for a long, uncomfortable beat, then put an arm around Sophie and me and walked us back to our chairs. Karen sputtered something about filing reports and rule violations, but it sounded weak, tinny. She knew she'd crossed a line she couldn't explain away. We left the pool early. Sophie was shaken, quieter than usual, but she clung to Tom's hand on the walk home. I was fuming, rehearsing all the things I should have said, the ways I could have ripped Karen's plastic crown right off her head. But Tom was silent, expression unreadable. He'd been quiet about the HOA from the beginning. He'd called them a nuisance, a bad hobby with paperwork, never more. Now, though, there was something different in his eyes. Calculating. When Sophie was tucked into bed, hair dried and comforted with extra ice cream, I cornered him in the kitchen. "Say it," I demanded, arms crossed. "You think I overreacted?" He shook his head. "No. You were right." That startled me. "Then why do you look like you're about to interrogate a mob boss?" "Because," he said slowly, "people like her don't get that bold overnight. Grabbing a kid, in front of everyone? That's not just arrogance. That's someone who knows they can't be touched." I blinked at him. "She's an HOA president. Not just an HOA president," he interrupted, sharp now. "Something's off. The board. The money. The way people are scared to push back. It smells wrong." I narrowed my eyes. Tom's FBI work was usually locked behind walls I wasn't allowed past. But the look he gave me now was the same one I'd seen when he was deep into a case, following threads no one else saw. My stomach tightened. "You're serious?" He leaned in, voice low. "If they think laying hands on my daughter was just another Tuesday, they're in for a surprise." That night, when the house was dark, I peeked into his office. His laptop glowed faintly, and he was scribbling notes, cross-checking documents, running searches. He didn't tell me what exactly he was looking for, but I knew. He wasn't just angry. He was building something. And that was the moment I realized. Karen had no idea who she'd just messed with. The first letter came 3 days after the pool fiasco. A white envelope with the HOA logo printed in smug little block letters. Inside, it was a violation notice accusing us of letting our grass grow past 3 inches. $75 due within 72 hours. I stared at it over my coffee while Tom read it like it was a joke. "They measured your grass?" he asked. "Apparently with NASA-level equipment," I muttered. The next day, another envelope arrived. This time it was for unapproved play equipment. Translation: Sophie's pink plastic elephant slide in the backyard. That one was $125. I laughed at first, because really, who finds a kid's toy? But by the end of the week, the laughter dried up. The violations kept rolling in. Garbage bins visible for more than 12 hours after pickup. $60 for flower pots that didn't harmonize with the paint. Karen and her crew were making it clear we were on their hit list. The more I paid attention, the more I saw their little regime in action. Karen wasn't working alone. She had her own henchman. Trevor, the treasurer, was a sweaty man with a permanent golf shirt who seemed to enjoy funneling fines into mysterious maintenance accounts. Denise, the secretary, had the twitchy energy of a raccoon and seemed to know more about people's habits than any normal neighbor should. Later, I found out why. She had hidden cameras disguised as birdhouses pointing at driveways and porches. And then there was Rick, the vice president, a retired cop who walked around like he still had a badge. He was the muscle, Karen's personal guard dog. And conveniently, when the HOA called in problems, Rick's old buddies at the sheriff's office always showed up on their side. What unsettled me most wasn't the board itself, but the silence. Neighbors who'd once been chatty at the mailbox started ducking their heads. Conversations cut off mid-sentence when Karen walked by. People were afraid, and that was scarier than any fine. One evening, Mrs. Ramirez from 2 doors down leaned close while I watered the roses. "They fined me $300 for a wind chime," she whispered. "Said it violated the noise ordinance." "A wind chime?" I repeated, incredulous. She nodded quickly, eyes darting to Karen's house like it had ears. "Don't fight them. It gets worse if you fight." And then she hurried away, like she was afraid she'd already said too much. While I ranted and cursed, Tom kept his cool. Too cool. He went about his routine like nothing was happening, But at night I'd hear the soft clack of his keyboard in his office, the hum of the printer, the low murmur of his voice on late-night calls. Once I caught a glimpse of his screen, spreadsheets full of names, addresses, license plates, bank records spiderwebbing into places I couldn't follow. "Tom," I said, standing in the doorway, "this isn't just about Karen anymore, is it?" He didn't look up. "It's never just about one person. This is your job creeping in." He paused then, glanced at me. "No. This is me being a dad." And there was nothing I could say to that. The HOA games kept getting bolder. Sophie's bike disappeared from the driveway one afternoon, and 2 days later we got a letter fining us for leaving unsightly items unsecured. They had fined us for our stolen bike. Another time our garbage bin vanished, and Rick himself showed up with a citation for failure to maintain waste receptacle. When I told him it had been stolen, he smirked. "Not the board's problem. Community standards still apply." If it hadn't been so dangerous, I might have admired the audacity. Then one night Tom called me into his office. He'd set up a camera near the HOA clubhouse and pulled audio from a meeting. Karen's voice cut through the static, nasal and smug. "We have to make examples. If people think they can push back, the whole system falls apart. That family on Oak Ridge? Perfect target. Loud, defiant. We crush them, the rest will fall in line." My skin crawled. Trevor chimed in next, chuckling about how the fines added up nicely. Shifted some into the improvement fund already. Means my nephew's landscaping business gets another contract. The whole room laughed. And then Rick's voice, low and smug, "And if they don't pay up, well, the county sheriff owes me a favor." Tom shut the laptop, his face hard. "They're not just a nuisance. They're running this place like a racket. Extortion. Fraud. Intimidation. They've painted a target on us," I whispered. He nodded. "Good. Gives me what I need." I tried to keep my sanity with jokes. I started calling our house the HOA's most wanted hideout. I told Sophie her elephant slide was contraband, like something out of a spy movie. Tom didn't laugh much, but even he cracked a grin when I threatened to plant a giant neon sign on the lawn. "Come find me, Karen." But no amount of jokes erased the dread that settled deeper each time another envelope showed up in the mailbox. The hammer dropped 2 weeks later. A thicker envelope, bold red letters screaming final notice. Inside, the words made me go cold. Notice of lien. Property, 1137 Oak Ridge Drive. Amount due, $2,375 in accumulated fines and penalties. Failure to remit payment will result in foreclosure proceedings. Foreclosure. I shoved the letter at Tom. "They are threatening to take the house." He scanned it calmly. Too calmly. "This is fraud. They don't have the authority." "Tell that to the sheriff when he shows up," I snapped, because I couldn't get Rick's voice out of my head. "The county sheriff owes me a favor." That night Tom made more calls. Not just the quiet digging I'd overheard before. These were longer, heavier calls. When he finally came to bed, his jaw was set, his eyes sharp with something I didn't recognize. "They think they're untouchable," he said softly. "Let's see how they like being on the other side of the raid." The harassment didn't just stick to paper after that. It bled into daily life, small attacks that piled up like bricks on our backs. Our car disappeared from the driveway one morning, towed without warning. When I called the city impound lot, they had no record. Hours later, Rick swaggered past on his morning walk and casually mentioned it had been removed for parking violations. On our own property. The smug twist of his mouth made it clear. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was about breaking us down piece by piece. Sophie's face fell when she noticed her bike still missing, her little eyes searching the yard like it might magically appear. That crushed me more than the fines. Kids shouldn't have to carry that kind of loss, that kind of fear. She clung to her stuffed rabbit tighter at night, asking if Karen was going to take away our house too. I told her no, but the words tasted like lies. Meanwhile, Karen strutted around the neighborhood like she was untouchable. Every time I saw her in that ridiculous visor, waving her clipboard like a scepter. I wanted to march across the street and snap it in half. She loved the show of power, pausing to chat loudly with her allies, letting everyone overhear how certain families were threatening the harmony of the community. Everyone knew who she meant. Tom stayed outwardly calm, but I could see the storm building behind his eyes. One night after Sophie went to bed, I confronted him. "You're digging too deep. You're pulling case files, making calls at 2 a.m. If they find out you're using FBI resources for this." He cut me off, his voice low but sharp. "They laid hands on our kid. This isn't about petty rules anymore. It's assault. It's fraud. It's a criminal operation hiding behind a homeowners association." I didn't argue, because part of me knew he was right. Still, the weight of what he was risking pressed on me. His career, our safety, everything. Then something unexpected happened. Our neighbors, the ones who'd kept their heads down, started showing up. A retired veteran from around the corner brought over a manila folder stuffed with letters and receipts. "They fined me into the ground," he said quietly, like confessing a sin. "They threatened foreclosure if I didn't donate to a community fund. I didn't know who to trust, but if you're fighting them, maybe it's time someone did." A single mom who lived near the playground came next. Her notice was for unauthorized tenants. Her crime? Letting her sister stay a few weeks after losing her job. Another family handed us photos of their slashed tires, a dog that had mysteriously vanished. And then, surprisingly, one of the board's former allies knocked on our door. A woman who'd resigned months earlier, eyes sunken with guilt. She whispered that she'd helped sign off on inflated contracts and had been pressured into silence. My kitchen table turned into something like a crime board. Stacks of notices, photographs, receipts, stories. Tom took it all in silently, every detail feeding into his growing case. I tried to lighten the mood, calling it HOA witness protection, and joking that our garage was going to be the new safe house. The others chuckled nervously, but the fear in their eyes didn't lift. People were genuinely terrified, and they were looking at us like we were their last hope. Tom worked methodically, stringing everything together. He uncovered that the board had been funneling HOA fees into offshore accounts under the guise of community improvement. Tens of thousands, maybe more. Landscaping contracts to shell companies, security services billed to firms that didn't exist. And those fines? They weren't just scare tactics. They were the engine that kept the whole scam afloat. Worse, Karen and her crew had bribed local officials to bury complaints. That explained why police reports went nowhere, why every attempt to push back was smothered before it could breathe. The more Tom showed me, the more I realized how deep the rot went. And the more nervous I became about how far Karen would go to keep it hidden. That fear proved right when the sheriff's department came knocking. Late afternoon, sun beating down, 2 deputies stood on our porch holding papers. "Emergency motion," one of them announced. "You've been cited for endangering community harmony. The board has moved for expedited eviction." Eviction. From our own house. I felt my knees wobble. Sophie clung to my leg, wide-eyed, sensing the danger even if she didn't understand the words. Karen herself was across the street, watching with arms crossed, smug grin plastered across her face. She waved like it was a block party. Tom stepped forward, calm as ever, and took the papers without a word. He read them, slowly, then looked up at the deputies. "Noted," he said simply. No argument, no outburst. Just a cool dismissal that made them shift uncomfortably before leaving. When the door shut, I lost it. "They're trying to evict us. They're not stopping, Tom. They're not going to stop until we're gone." He folded the papers neatly, set them on the counter, and looked at me with that steady gaze. "Good. Now I can prove obstruction, harassment, abuse of authority. It's exactly what I needed." I wanted to scream at him for being so calm, for treating this like pieces on a chessboard while our lives were being ripped apart. But then I caught Sophie's eyes, scared and confused, and I swallowed it down. Someone had to keep it together. That night the calls got heavier, longer. Tom spoke in clipped sentences, code I didn't understand. He laid out the evidence, names, dates, numbers. He wasn't just collecting anymore. He was preparing. And as much as I feared where it was heading, a part of me clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, Karen and her army of clipboard tyrants were about to find out what real power looked like. Because if there was one thing Tom had taught me over the years, it was that you don't poke a bear and expect to walk away unscathed. And Karen? She hadn't just poked him. She'd dragged his daughter out of a pool by the hair. The morning of the raid didn't look any different at first. Sunlight spilling over the rooftops, sprinklers ticking across trimmed lawns, Karen already outside with her visor and clipboard like she was patrolling her kingdom. She didn't know the storm was coming. None of them did. Tom was up before dawn, pacing quietly through the kitchen, phone in hand. He'd barely slept in days, running on caffeine and sheer resolve. When he kissed Sophie on the forehead before she woke for school, there was something final in it. Like he was drawing a line between before and after. By 7 a.m., the first unmarked van rolled into the cul-de-sac. Then another. And another. They moved in like shadows, deliberate, controlled. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, confused at first. Then the letters stenciled on the agents' jackets caught the light. FBI. I stood frozen at the window as black-clad figures fanned out. For weeks we'd been waiting, dreading, flinching at every knock on the door. Now it was the other side's turn. The clubhouse was their first target. A battering ram splintered the door in one strike, agents pouring inside. Shouts echoed, the sound of heavy boots on tile. Seconds later, Trevor was dragged out, red-faced and sputtering, clutching a handful of papers he'd tried to shove under a desk. Denise followed, wailing that she only took notes while an agent carried out a box of surveillance equipment that looked like it belonged in a spy lab, not a suburb. Rick resisted. Of course he did. He puffed his chest, barked about jurisdiction, flashed his old badge like it still meant something. But two agents had him cuffed before he could finish his speech, hauling him down the walkway while he cursed. And then there was Karen. She came storming out in her robe and slippers, hair wild, screaming about sovereign HOA rights and community bylaws. She demanded to see a warrant, shrieking that this was her neighborhood. When the agents closed cuffs around her wrists, she twisted and kicked, but it was useless. Her reign was over. Neighbors poured onto their lawns, first cautious, then emboldened. I saw Mrs. Ramirez covering her mouth, tears running down her cheeks. The veteran from around the corner stood at attention like it was the best parade he'd ever witnessed. Parents clutched their kids close, watching the tyrants of the cul-de-sac led away in chains. One moment stuck with me. Trevor, still trying to eat receipts he'd pulled from a folder. Bits of paper clinging to his sweaty lips while an agent rolled his eyes and shoved him into a van. Even in chaos, there was comedy. Tom stayed composed through all of it, barely speaking, just watching as weeks of evidence and sleepless nights finally cracked open into daylight. When Karen shrieked his name, accusing him of orchestrating the whole thing, he didn't even blink. He just put a hand on my shoulder, steady and grounding, as though to remind me, it's done. The charges rolled out faster than I could process. Wire fraud, racketeering, extortion, bribery, harassment. The HOA hadn't been a community association. It had been a front for theft and intimidation on a scale nobody expected. And because they'd gone after us so viciously, because they'd gotten sloppy, the whole operation was laid bare. By the afternoon, the cul-de-sac looked different. Calmer. Like the air itself was lighter. The HOA signs that had once loomed on every corner now felt like relics of some bad joke. Neighbors gathered for the first time without fear, trading stories, laughing nervously, realizing the nightmare was over. Sophie begged to go back to the pool. At first I hesitated, but Tom nodded. She deserves it. So we went. No wristbands. No clipboards. Just kids splashing under the sun, parents chatting freely for once. When Sophie cannonballed into the deep end and came up giggling, I felt something inside me finally unclench. Later, as we walked home, I couldn't help myself. All she had to do was let Sophie swim. That's it. But no, she had to play dictator. Now she's going to spend the next decade explaining HOA bylaws to a cellmate. Tom gave me the faintest smirk. Let's just say, next time we buy a house, it won't be under an HOA. I bumped his shoulder. Fine, but we're still getting a pool. He groaned, half amused, half resigned. As long as no one fines me for the grass being too high. The neighborhood would rebuild. A new board, real transparency, neighbors running it instead of tyrants. But for us, the lesson was etched in stone. Some people mistake control for power, and when they finally push too far, they forget, real power doesn't walk around with a clipboard. Sometimes, it shows up in black jackets at dawn. And sometimes, it's just a dad who won't let anyone lay a hand on his kid.